A man once sat in silence, staring at the ceiling, his heart heavy with frustration. He had prayed over and over, but the silence from heaven was deafening. No answers, no signs, just the echo of his own words. His mind raced with questions. Am I doing this wrong? Does God even hear me? Why does prayer feel like I'm just talking to myself? It's a feeling most people don't talk about. We know we're supposed to pray, but no one tells us what to do when it feels empty. We repeat the same words, ask for the same things, and hope for a miracle. But deep down, there's a part of us that wonders if we're missing something, if we're praying the way we were meant to. That's when you look at Jesus. The disciples saw him pray often, alone, in silence. And they noticed something. His prayers weren't like anyone else's. When he prayed, things happened. The blind saw, the sick were healed, storms were calmed, and demons fled. So they asked him in Luke 11:1, Lord, teach us to pray. That's where it begins, not with knowing what to say, but with knowing who you're speaking to. Prayer isn't a ritual. It isn't a formula. It's something deeper, something sacred. But have we lost that? Have we traded the raw, honest prayers of the Bible for something shallow, something repetitive, something we think sounds right? Maybe that's why our prayers feel weak, because we've forgotten how to pray the way Scripture teaches us. And maybe, just maybe, the answer to your deepest questions about prayer has been in the Bible all along. This is how to pray, according to the Bible. A Pharisee stood in the temple, lifting his hands high. His voice rang out for everyone to hear in Luke 18:11-12. God, I thank you that I am not like other men, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get. A few feet away, a tax collector stood, head down, unable to even lift his eyes, his voice barely above a whisper. God, have mercy on me, a sinner, in Luke 18:13. Jesus looked at the people in front of him and asked the question that no one expected. Which of these men do you think went home justified? The answer was not the one who prayed the longest, not the one who sounded the most religious, not the one who made himself look holy. It was the one who understood what prayer is really about. That's the first thing people get wrong about prayer. They make it about themselves, their needs, their achievements, their holiness, their reputation. They think prayer is about sounding right, looking spiritual, getting what they want. But prayer doesn't start with you. Jesus made that clear when he taught his disciples how to pray. He didn't start with requests. He didn't start with personal needs. He started with a name. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Matthew 6:9. Prayer begins with God, His holiness, His kingdom, His will. Because before you ever ask for anything, you have to understand who you are talking to. That's why so many prayers feel empty, because they start in the wrong place. They start with a list of demands instead of a heart that recognizes who is on the other side of the conversation. Moses understood this. When he stood before God in the wilderness in Exodus 33:18, he didn't bring a list of requests. He had one plea. Show me your glory. David understood this. His most desperate prayers weren't just about being saved from his enemies. They were about being near God. In Psalm 27:4, he said, One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek him in his temple. Jesus himself understood this. In the garden, on the night he was betrayed, his prayer wasn't for escape. It was for the will of the Father to be done. That's the kind of prayer God listens to. The kind that isn't about control, but about surrender. The kind that doesn't try to twist God's hand, but instead says, I trust you. But most people don't pray like that. They come to God with an agenda. They want him to fix things, give them things, make things easier. And when they don't get what they want, they walk away saying, prayer doesn't work. But prayer was never about making God do what you want. It's about making you align with what he wants. That's why Jesus warned in Matthew 6:7, when you pray, do not babble like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Because at the end of the day, the length of your prayer doesn't matter. The words don't matter. The heart behind it does. And if your heart is only focused on yourself, then you've already missed the point. One day, the disciples watched Jesus pray. They had seen religious leaders pray before. Loud, rehearsed, dramatic prayers meant to impress. But Jesus was different. His prayers weren't for show. They had power. When he prayed, things changed. So they asked him in Luke 11:1, Lord, teach us to pray. And instead of giving them a formula, he gave them something deeper, a blueprint. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Matthew 6:9-13. Most people treat this like a ritual, something to repeat, word for word, as if saying it enough times unlocks some kind of divine favor. But Jesus wasn't teaching a script. He was revealing how prayer actually works. It starts with relationship. Our Father in heaven, not a distant force, not a cold ruler, Father. This changes everything. It means prayer isn't a transaction. It's not about performance. It's about a child coming to their father, not out of fear, but out of trust. Then comes worship. Hallowed be your name. Before you ask for anything, you recognize who he is, holy, sovereign, good. Because if you don't start there, your prayers will always be shaped by your problems instead of his presence. Then surrender. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Most people rush into prayer with a list of demands, but Jesus says, start with surrender. Because prayer isn't about bending God's will to fit yours. It's about bending your heart to fit his. Then comes dependence. Give us this day our daily bread. Not give us success. Not make us comfortable. Just bread. Today. Because wisdom understands something pride does not. Everything we have comes from him. And the wise don't pray for abundance before they pray for sustenance. Then forgiveness. Forgive us our debts as we also have forgiven our debtors. God doesn't just hear the words you say in prayer. He sees the condition of your heart. A person who prays for mercy but refuses to show it to others isn't praying at all. In Matthew 6:15, he says, if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. Then comes protection. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Because even the strongest fail, even the faithful can be led astray. And Jesus reminds us, prayer is not just about asking for things, it's about preparing for battle. This is the blueprint, not a ritual, not a script to repeat without thinking, but a way of praying that aligns you with God. The Pharisees knew how to pray long, impressive prayers. The disciples saw how the religious leaders did it, but they asked Jesus, "Lord, teach us to pray," because they saw the difference. And the question is, do you? A woman had been bleeding for 12 years. Doctors had failed her. Money had run out. Hope had dried up. But then she heard about Jesus. She wasn't important enough to ask him for help. She wasn't strong enough to push through the crowd. But she knew, if I can just touch the edge of his robe, I will be healed. Matthew 9:21. So she reached. In an instant, her body changed. The pain was gone. The bleeding stopped. But before she could slip away unnoticed, Jesus turned. He had felt power leave him. The crowd was thick, people pressing in on all sides. But he knew. Someone had touched him differently. She fell at his feet, trembling, expecting rebuke. But instead, Jesus looked at her and said, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Not my power, not your effort, your faith." That's what most people misunderstand about prayer. They think faith means praying hard enough, long enough, with the right words, so God will finally give them what they want. But faith isn't about how you pray, it's about who you trust. Hebrews 11:6 says, "Without faith, it is impossible to please God." Not because faith is some magic formula, but because faith is the foundation of every true prayer. Without it, you're just speaking words into the air, hoping for something to stick. Look at the centurion. His servant was dying, and he could have begged Jesus to come to his house. But instead he said, "Just say the word, and my servant will be healed," in Matthew 8:8. Jesus marveled. He had seen crowds follow him. He had seen people chase after miracles. But this man, this Roman, this outsider, understood something most didn't. He didn't need to see it happen. He just needed to know Jesus had spoken. In Matthew 8:10, Jesus said, "Truly, I tell you, I have not found such great faith in all of Israel." That's real faith. The kind that doesn't demand proof. The kind that doesn't walk away just because the answer hasn't come yet. The kind that believes God is still working, even in silence. But faith isn't just about believing you'll get what you want. Look at Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, standing before a furnace so hot it killed the men who threw them in. The king gave them a choice: worship the idol or die. Their answer in Daniel 3:17-18 was, "Our God is able to deliver us, but even if he does not, we will not bow." That's faith, not just believing that God can, but trusting him even if he doesn't. Paul prayed 3 times for God to take away his affliction. 3 times heaven was silent, until finally God answered. Not with healing, but with these words, "My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness." Faith is not about forcing God's hand. It's about holding on to his character. Some people pray and they see the miracle. Some pray and they wait years. Some pray and the answer is no. But faith says, even if I don't see it, even if I don't understand it, I still believe you are good. Because faith isn't about getting what you want. It's about trusting God, no matter what. Saul stood in the darkness, desperate. He had once been a king chosen by God, but now he was a man abandoned. The Philistines were closing in. War was at his doorstep, and for the first time in his life, he was afraid. So he prayed, according to 1 Samuel 28:6. But the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams or by Urim or by prophets. Silence. So Saul did what the desperate do. He found another way. He sought out a medium, disguised himself, and asked her to summon the prophet Samuel from the dead. When Samuel appeared, his words cut deeper than Saul was ready for. Why do you consult me, now that the Lord has departed from you and become your enemy? 1 Samuel 28:16. Saul had spent his life ignoring God's commands, doing things his own way, choosing power over obedience. And now, when he needed an answer, he finally turned to God. But God wasn't answering, because some prayers don't get answered. James explained why in James 4:3. You ask and do not receive, because you ask with the wrong motives, that you may spend it on your pleasures. Some prayers go unanswered, not because God is cruel, but because the heart behind them is corrupt. The Israelites learned this the hard way. After they rebelled against God and refused to enter the Promised Land, He told them they would wander in the wilderness for 40 years. Suddenly, they changed their minds. Suddenly, they were ready to obey. They marched toward battle, confident that God would fight for them. But Moses warned them, "Do not go up, for the Lord is not with you." Numbers 14:42. They went anyway. They prayed, they fought, and they lost. Because their obedience wasn't real. They didn't seek God because they loved Him. They sought Him because they feared the consequences of their rebellion. And God does not honor prayers rooted in disobedience. It's a terrifying thought that a person could pray, could cry out in desperation, and yet God would not listen. But why? Because some people only want God when they need something. They ignore Him when life is good, then demand His help when things fall apart. But God is not just a God of convenience. He is not a tool to be used in times of trouble. Some prayers aren't answered because they come from a proud heart, according to James 4:6. Some aren't answered because they come from unforgiveness, according to Matthew 6:15. Some prayers aren't answered because the timing isn't right. For the vision awaits its appointed time, though it linger. Wait for it. Habakkuk 2:3. And some prayers aren't answered because God has something better. Paul prayed 3 times for God to remove his thorn. 3 times heaven was silent, until finally God answered. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. 2 Corinthians 12:9. God always answers prayer. Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is wait. Sometimes the answer is no. But there is one prayer He always answers. A widow stood before a judge, a man with no conscience, no sense of justice, and no fear of God. She had no power, no money, no influence. But she had one thing: persistence. Day after day, she came to him. Grant me justice against my adversary. At first, the judge ignored her. He didn't care. But she didn't stop. She kept coming, knocking, pleading, until finally the judge said to himself, even though I don't fear God or care about people, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice, so that she won't wear me out with her constant requests. Luke 18:4-5. In Luke 18:7, Jesus told the story for one reason. Will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? Luke 18:7. But most people don't pray like that. They pray once, maybe twice. If nothing happens, they assume it wasn't meant to be. They walk away. They stop asking. They stop believing. And they miss the miracle. Hannah knew what it meant to pray persistently. Year after year, she wept before God, asking for a child. She was mocked, humiliated, called barren, but she kept praying. One day, Eli the priest saw her, mistook her desperation for drunkenness, and scolded her. In 1 Samuel 1:15, she said, "I am not drunk. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord." And God heard her. Jesus himself prayed with persistence. In the Garden of Gethsemane, knowing the cross was before him, he fell to the ground and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours will be done." Luke 22:42. He prayed again and again. Persistent prayer builds faith. It strengthens endurance. It shifts your heart into alignment with God's will. It turns desperation into trust, anxiety into peace. That's why Jesus said in Matthew 7:7, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you." Not ask once and give up. Not knock once and walk away. Ask, seek, knock again and again and again. So pray and keep praying. Even when the answer hasn't come yet, even when the silence feels unbearable, even when you don't understand, because prayer is not about moving God toward you. It's about moving yourself toward Him.